In this video, we take a look at 8 times Nihal Sarin shocked the chess world. On number 8, in this game, 15-year-old Nihal was up against 29-year-old Nepomniachtchi, or Nepo for short. This game was played in 2019, still before Nepo played 2 World Championship matches, one against Magnus and another one against Ding Liren. Nepo back then was one of the very best players in the world. The position out of the opening looks very weird. You have 5 seconds to guess Nihal's next move in this position. Okay, time's up. Nihal, with only 6 seconds on the clock, plays the move knight to h6 check. If you've been playing chess for more than a month, you might think this is a blunder, as the black pawn can take the knight. And this is very true. But for the purpose of this video, we have to call this a genius piece sacrifice. Nepo calls the bluff and takes the knight, and Nihal takes the pawn back. So now Nihal is just down a piece. But there is an idea behind this move, and that is that Nihal's bishop gets much stronger, because now the bishop can attack the knight without the pawn defending it. Nepo now plays an overly defensive move, queen to f8, asking whether Nihal wants to trade queens. And Nihal doesn't want this. If you're down a piece, it's not very smart to trade pieces. But Nihal actually ends up winning the piece back, and he attacks even another of his opponent's pieces. Nepo plays rook to e2, defending the knight. And now, in this position, you have 5 seconds to figure out the winning move for Nihal. If you're an intermediate player, you should have found queen to b8 check. The black rook has lost control over the back rank, and it's gonna be mate next move. After king to h7, there's queen to h8, checkmate. Nepo looks absolutely devastated, which is understandable. Losing to a 15-year-old isn't much fun. On number 7, Nihal is up against Hans Niemann, the guy from the Anal Beats, who in hindsight actually had nothing to do with it, and the recent Netflix documentary. Anyway, he's actually one of the strongest grandmasters, sitting on place number 12 on the world rankings. In this position, Niemann aims to promote his pawn, but that's a blunder, and you have 5 seconds to figure out the winning move for Nihal. Okay, time's up. Unless you're a professional chess player, you probably wouldn't be able to guess the winning move. But if you did, let me know in the comments. The winning move is rook to g3, and there's actually no way to stop the checkmate, but it's quite difficult to understand. It has to do with the black rooks and the knight. Those pieces cooperate and forcefully give checkmate. Hans actually resigned in this position, but if he continued, let's say, pushing his pawn, there's a checkmate in 2 moves. Rook takes pawn on h3. The pawn has to take back, and now rook to h3 is actually checkmate with the rook and the knight. It's very pretty. On number 6, Nihal's up against Sindarov. This game was played 2 years ago, when Sindarov was still a rather unknown prodigy, but since then he's won the World Cup and he's won the Candidates Tournament to become the World Championship challenger. Sindarov plays the move king to b2. Now Nihal's rook is attacked twice, both by the rook and the king. There is a clear threat to take that rook. You have 5 seconds to guess Nihal's next move. Okay, time's up. 97% of chess players would probably be inclined to take the rook on b3, because this looks quite a safe option, but it's too safe. You can actually keep the pieces on the board with the tricky move rook to c4, and the rook can't be taken because white would lose his rook and Nihal would have a strong initiative. Sindarov understands that the rook can't be taken and plays king to c1 instead. And now rook to d4 by Nihal, lining up the rooks, intending a pawn push with c4. Sindarov plays c4 himself. If you know all the chess rules, you'd be familiar with the weird French term en passant, and this applies here. Nihal plays the magical move pawn takes pawn on c3, even though there is no pawn on c3. Sindarov takes back, and now Nihal plays the pawn break. Nihal keeps the initiative and ends up taking the very important pawn on f3. It's pretty much over. This was a very important strategic accomplishment because Nihal can now push the f-pawn towards promotion. Sindarov can't stop this, and he has to resign the game. On number 5, Nihal is up against a chess grandmaster who makes a blunder with the move rook to f4. You have 5 seconds to find the winning move for Nihal. Okay, if you look closely, you can see that the queen and the bishop are lined up against the pawn that's defending the king. If the queen can potentially take that pawn, it's checkmate. So you might want to move the knight. And even though Nihal's opponent walked away in confidence, Nihal spots the blunder immediately and he plays the winning move attacking white's queen, despite having loads of time left on the clock. Queen to f3. So now the queen is no longer attacked, and it also seems like there is no more checkmate tricks. But Nihal is 2 steps ahead, and you have, again, 5 seconds to spot the very last move of the game, knight to e2, which is a double exclamation mark move. It's a genius level move. The cool thing about this move is that the knight can be taken by 2 pieces, but either way it's gonna be checkmate next move. If the queen were to take the knight, Nihal's queen can deliver checkmate, and if the rook takes the knight, it's important to note the white king is stuck behind 3 pawns. So if the rook were to move to the back rank, this will end up in checkmate. If the knight is not taken, the king is in check, so the king has to move, and after any king move, let's say king to h1, the grandmaster loses his rook. But after knight to e2, Nihal's opponent isn't even bothered to play on, and he smiles in pain. Ouch. On number 4, we have a very funny game against Grandmaster Dubov. It looks like Dubov is winning, but he plays a blunder, bishop to a2. You have 5 seconds to figure out Nihal's best move in this position. Okay, Nihal in this position can actually force a stalemate. Stalemate is where you can't move any piece without doing something illegal. You can already see here in this position that the king can't move, because all of its surrounding squares are either obstructed or attacked by his opponent. Also, the black pawn is now obstructed by the white bishop. This is why the bishop move was a blunder. It's because the bishop makes it impossible for the pawn to move forward. There's only still a bishop and the queen to get rid of. Nihal's strategy is to sacrifice the 2 remaining pieces, the bishop and the queen. Bishop to g5, he sacrifices the bishop. But Dubov understands Nihal's strategy to go for a stalemate. He actually refuses to take the bishop, but Nihal is even smarter. He finds a way to forcefully sacrifice the bishop and the queen, and he ends up in a stalemate position. This is so pretty. On number 3, in this game against Indian Grandmaster Vidit Gujrathi, Nihal positioned his queen to diagonally face the black king. Now, Nihal might have some tricky moves with his rook. The Grandmaster blocks with his queen. Nihal pushes his pawn forward. The pawn gets taken, but that's a mistake. And you have 5 seconds to find Nihal's next move. Rook takes pawn on e6 is a double exclamation mark move. The Grandmaster takes the rook and Nihal plays rook to e4. The queen puts the king in check, and simultaneously there's an attack on the black queen. But Nihal's opponent blocks the check with his queen, and it looks like Nihal's opponent takes care of both threats. And Nihal actually believes this at first, but then his mimic changes completely when he finds the great follow-up move rook to e7 check. The queen can't take the rook because that would be an illegal move. In that case, Nihal could take the opponent's king. In chess, we don't allow that. The bishop now has to block. You have 5 seconds to find the final move for Nihal. Okay, time's up. Knight to h5 checks the king and attacks the queen. And the bishop can't take the knight, because that would be an illegal move. Again, then the rook could take the king, and we don't allow this in chess. Amazing attacking combo by Nihal. On number 2, this is the most recent game against Grandmaster Firouzja. Firouzja has qualified 2 times for the Candidates Tournament, which is the qualifier for the World Championship. He won the 2024 and 2025 Bullet Chess Championships. These players have known each other for a very long time. Here you can see an old clip of them playing casual bullet chess. In this clip, Firouzja is 15 years old and Nihal is 14 years old. Firouzja wins the game and they're both having a good time. Firouzja and Nihal have to battle it out in this year's edition of the Bullet Chess Championship. In this championship, players have 1 minute to make all of their moves, which is not a lot of time. They have to play a ton of games to decide a winner. Nihal started on the back foot but ended up grinding out a 15-game win streak. You can see here game number 15 of the win streak. The commentators are impressed and Firouzja looks absolutely devastated. Firouzja lost a pawn. The position became hopeless for Firouzja, and after the game, Nihal noted that the 15-game win streak is probably the best achievement in his life so far. And finally, on number 1, we have a game of 12-year-old Nihal against a strong grandmaster by the name of Postny. This game was filmed 9 years ago. Nihal is up 1 pawn, but the endgame should, in theory, be equal, because Black's queen is very active. Black starts giving a bunch of checks, and Nihal, actually in this position, pretends like he will go for a repetition and a draw. Nihal makes a different move after 2 repetitions, so he's just making fun of his opponent basically. Nihal launches his post pawn. He wants a second queen on the board. Some more checks on the white king, and now Nihal has his own chance of checking the black king. And he repeats the moves a few times, which is very unnecessary. Like, it's just for the show basically. The audience is definitely entertained. Finally, Nihal makes a new queen and blocks the check with his first queen. Wow, what a win! The audience starts laughing. Okay, that's it for today. See you in the next one.